interesting one. And this is around, and it's got an interesting title, Disclosures and Declarations, Treatment of Disclosures and Declarations. And it states very, very interestingly enough that the institution must, as part of the SCM process, identify and manage all potential conflicts of interest and other disclosures made by a person participating in the procurement process to enable the AOAA to make informed decisions about the person participating in the SM process. And just to give you a heads up, and I've jumped right here to 7.9, this is all to do with SBD4, so the treatment of disclosures and declarations. But the inclusion of this other disclosures is an interesting one, and the other disclosures is also not defined anywhere. What is meant by other disclosures? 7.2 then talks about SBD4, and there's a confusion between 7.2 and 7.3, and here is my conclusion. Institutions may incorporate the information contained in SBD4 into their bid documents, including documents issued for the invitation of price quotations, but may not alter the content of the disclosure and the order of information captured in the SBD4. Then it goes on to, so it says may, you may incorporate, it's giving you discretion, you may incorporate SBD4, but if you do incorporate SBD4, you may not alter the content of it. And then it goes on to say that SBD4 applies to all procurement irrespective of the value and method of procurement, excluding petty cash purchases, and must be completed by all persons responding to the invitation. It must be completed by all persons responding to the invitation, but it gives you the discretion as to whether you should incorporate it in your bid document or not. And then the AA must, as part of the evaluation of a procurement process, evaluate information provided by a person on SBD4. Let's just keep going, and then we can open up the discussion. If in the evaluation process, you then determine that that person is employed by the state and they are potentially prohibited, and this is where PALMA is now mentioned, the first time we've seen PALMA in an SCM instruction, you must request the relevant accounting authority to advise whether that person has permissions to indeed perform the other remunerative work. So this has not been included before. This is now saying that if you pick up that there is someone who is working for the state, so for example, what often happens in maybe the medical fraternity, you've got somebody who is a practicing private practitioner, but they spend a day a week working for the state, then you're going to then have to contact them and check that that person does indeed have permission to work outside of the state. So that's the first one, is the PALMA-related issues. The next one is the conduct of a person, and this is the PRECA one that Ron mentioned earlier. The conduct of a person constitutes a transgression of the Prevention of Combating Corrupt Activities Act. That must then be dealt with in accordance with the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. And then C goes on and talks then about the Competition Act. The conduct must be reported to the Competition Commission. And then the conduct of a person constitutes a transgression of the institution's policies. The conduct must be dealt with in terms of the prescripts applicable to the institution. I still have to get my mind around this one. So if somebody transgresses your policy, the conduct must be dealt with in terms of the prescripts applicable to the institution. Maybe somebody can unpack that for us. And if you then establish that the person has committed a transgression, you may then reject the bid and restrict the person in terms of paragraph 6, the restriction point we've just gone through. You must inform Treasury of any action taken against a person in terms of paragraph 7.6 within 30 days of implementing the action, something new. And during the evaluation process, the accounting authority must, in addition to other due diligence measures, establish if that person is not listed on the register for tender defaulters, and that's the Prevention, Combating of Corrective Activities Act, and then the restricted list. And then, interestingly enough, regulations under the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. And this is in there because of the section that they've squeezed into the 2022 draft draft preferential procurement regulations, where there's a kind of restriction process that's included there. So some interesting new things here. If you do decide to take action against them, then you have to inform Treasury. This, I think, is going to pose some challenges, particularly if they are restricted, which often does happen. You then have to tell them. We didn't have to do that in the past. Some interesting forms. Let me quickly run through what SBD4 is all about. So SBD4 goes through, describes the purpose of the form. Any person may make an offer or offers in terms of this invitation to bid in line with the principles of transparency, accountability, impartiality, ethics as enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and further expressed in various pieces of legislation. It is required for the bidder to make this declaration in respect to the details required hereunder. Where a person's listed under the register for tender defaulters and or the list of restricted suppliers, that person will automatically be disqualified from the bid process. Then it has the bidder's declaration. This was not in the draft. This has now been put back in. Is the bidder or any of its directors, trustees, shareholders, this was in, a partner or a person having a controlling interest in the enterprise employed by the state? So this controlling interest was in the draft, and they describe what that controlling interest is: the power by one person or a group of persons holding the majority of the equity of an enterprise, alternatively the person having the deciding vote or power to influence or to direct the course and decisions of the enterprise. Very, very interesting. So this is included then in the SBD4, that they need to state this and give a yes or no. And if no, then they need to include the full names and identity number and the name of the state institution that this refers to. So there's a requirement then by the bidders to complete this. 2.2 brings back in again, but interesting differences here. Do you or any person connected with the bidder have a relationship with any person who is employed by the procuring institution? Yes or no? If so, furnish particulars. We didn't have this before. This was related to person employed by the procuring institution who may be involved in the evaluation or adjudication of the bid. Now you've got to say anyone that you know that you are connected with that is employed by that procuring institution, and if so, furnish particulars. I'm still not sure what the implication of this is going to be in the evaluation process. Does the bidder or any of its directors, trustees, shareholders, members, partners have a controlling interest in the enterprise, have any interest in any other related enterprise, whether or not they're bidding for this contract, yes or no? So this is similar to what has been in there before. If so, furnish particulars. And then there's the declaration. And in the declaration, there's the person who's doing it. I've read and understand the context of the disclosure. Understand the accompanying bid will be disqualified if the disclosure is found not to be true and complete in every respect. The bidder has arrived at the accompanying bid independently from and without consultation, communication, agreement, or arrangement with any other competitor. However, communication between partners in a joint venture will not be construed as collusive bidding. This has been an issue in the past, but very, very interesting level of detail that's here. In addition, there have been no consultation, communication agreements, or arrangements with any competitor regarding the quality, quantity, specifications, prices, including methods, factors, formulas used to calculate prices, market allocation, the intention or decision to submit or not submit a bid, bidding with the intention not to win the bid, and conditions of delivery, particularly the. This is all the collusion issues which they're trying to talk about here, and they do also describe then the consortium issue as well. The joint venture consortium issue is described there. Purpose of combining their expertise, property, capital, effort, skill, knowledge of an activity for the execution of a contract. This is exactly out of an earlier, I think the 2011, Henry, if I'm not mistaken, the 2011 regulations used this definition of joint venture consortium. Haven't seen that since the 2011 regulations. The terms of the accompanying bid have not been and will not be disclosed by the bidder directly or indirectly to any competitor prior to the date and time of the official bid opening or of the awarding of a contract. This for a bidder would be confusing. Okay, so when you've opened it, then I can, or of the awarding of the contract. There have been no consultation, communication agreements, or arrangement made with any official of the procuring institution in relation to the procurement process prior to and during the bid process, except for the provision of clarification, but submitted where so required by the institution. The bidder was not involved with drafting the specification or terms of reference of the bid. And then there's reference to Competition Act and Preventing Corrupt Activities Act to that they're aware of that. And then there is, I certify the above information is correct. I accept that you may reject the bid or act against me in terms of paragraph 6 of the PFMA SM's instruction 3 on preventing combating abuse in the supply chain management system. They've got the name incorrect here because they've now changed the name. This is not the name. They sign as they have done previously, and there's no real change here. So that's very interesting what they're doing with the SBD4. Go ahead, Sekhle.
Thanks, Sean. I was looking at the SBD4 and I said, okay, something is good happening. And then I was comforted by 7.2. While I was smiling, getting the comfort, then I got disappointed when they say, but may not alter the contents of the disclosure.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why that is, I'm looking at if you go to where it talks about the relation with the employee of the procuring institution. Now, we as a procuring institution, we also have to do the declarations of interest in our environment, where you declare your businesses as a person being employed by the institution. Now here it talks about any relationship. Now, what's the relationship? Now it goes into that assumption which was there before to say what constitutes a relationship. Is my pastor in that relationship? Is my that kind of relationship? Are we talking about this relationship or what kind of relationship? All right. Now it says the relationship with any person who is employed by the procuring institution. Okay, then you can and then you can say yes or no, and then finish the details. Now my interest was further down on 3.4, the first 3.4 paragraph, which was saying there is no communication. Now there should be here it's fine. There is no communication or agreements with any competitor, but then I was thinking of also having another one which will add and talk about any communication or agreement with an employee of the institution, where you declare that, not necessarily here, but it's not here. I'm saying I would have liked to put that or to include that clause as part of saying you did not have, because the relationship, assuming the relationship above talks about your spouse, your child, your what above, or okay, say you don't have, but you could have a friendship with somebody who has information that is sort of part similar to the information in 3.4, where it will give you as a service provider an advantage. So now for me, that above part, which talks the relationship with a person employed, is fine, it's correct, it's there. But below, I would have also liked to include the 3.5, which would say you have no relationship, or I mean no communication in this part now with the person employed by the procuring institution, and so on, in terms of, you know, just any other person who might give you information and advantage. So now if they say you can't alter the contents, now which means we can now put that, in my view, which I feel that in my institution, my environment, it needs to be there. So that's why I was happy that it's there, and it says we may incorporate. So I would have loved to incorporate in my policy or in my documents, and then include this kind of particular clause in there at the bottom. Now they say we can't alter the contents. Then again, Sean, it comes back to this thing which says the SBD documents, the ones that have been repealed, they were not applicable to Schedule 3D institutions. Now with this one, because now this is not an SBD instruction, it's merely incorporating the instruction on an instruction that applies to a 3D institution. Now automatically they say I must put in an SBD, and it becomes applicable to our institutions. And then yet they say at the same time we can't alter it, or we can't put it in a manner that is going to ensure that as an institution we are also covering these aspects of that we want to include. They say we can we can incorporate, but we can't alter. So now they are pushing this institution into this SBD environment, which which has not been good, or somehow not applicable to this particular institution with the previous SBDs. So yeah.
Would you agree if I was to include all the comments that we've had today in the YouTube video, and we invited National Treasury to view the comments? They've been, you know, would you be okay with that?
For me, yes, because they need to hear what we are saying. Implementation.
They will. Yeah. Good. Thanks, Sikhle. Hey,
Thank
Ron.
you.
I made that point, Ron. I know you won't mind at all. Go ahead, Ron.
No, what I'll say publicly.
Yeah.
Sean, just 4 brief points. One is, it seems to be that this one applies over 2,000 rand.
Yeah.
And I suspect a lot of public, entities are only applying, a number of these SBDs over 30,000. So I'd be interested in colleagues' comments if they interpret this now that they must now apply it over 2,000. The second one is, I just want to focus on 3.5.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask colleagues' forbearance on this one, because in the innovation space, a lot of what we normally do in normal SCM is permitted when you're procuring innovation. So, and of course there is, I think we might have even pointed out in the consultation process, but in terms of normal market consultation, you go through an EOI, RFI, even proposal stage. So, this 3.5 seems too draconian, because those processes seem to have been consultation communications. So it seems to ban normal market research, which is again ridiculous. Then, and this is where I'm going to ask colleagues' forbearance, because they may think I'm smoking something, but what I'm going to be saying is in fact a legal instrument. So within the South African national standards, which is adopted an international standard on specifications, there's a particular instrument called competitive dialogue, and the essence of dialogue is talking. So it's communication and consultation. So that's a permitted CIDB tool, but this particular 3.5 bans it, and it can't. It's conflict with that. And the other issue was, which may be a little bit broader, is that presumably we get the SBD4 when we do deviations or these other means. And if we do, then it also contradicts our rights to do discussions and negotiations and all the rest of it in terms of some of those sort of other means. Thanks, Sean.
Good one, Ron. The competitive negotiations, direct negotiations option. Yeah. Good.
Sean, can we just ask colleagues about the 2,000 rand? Did they see
I'm going to.
Sorry.
Good one. Good. Let's go ahead. And anyone else been using SBD 4, 8, and 9? Particularly, I mean, you're in an organization that didn't have to. So I see there's one. Veronica said currently 30,000 does not exist if I required over 2,000. Yeah, so this is now saying that it is required for anything over 2,000, Veronica. So just interested, have you been applying this to anything less than 30,000 or other quotations? So any comments from anyone? At what level did you start applying SBD4? You can quickly put some comments in the chat. Dolly, anything? Indira, Khali?
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Khali.
For us, we've been applying the declaration on everything.
Everything.
No threshold.
SBD4
except
and
in terms
8 and
of
9?
except for petty cash, because we had a separate petty cash policy that has its own process. But anything above the petty cash, we've been having the SBD4 done for all of them.
I guess then, Khali, this would be welcome that there's just one document now that needs to be
I was
completed.
very happy with that. I was very happy with the one page.
Do you think that, because you've also got innovation entities within your scope, do you think they may also struggle a little bit with this issue that Ron has raised around the competitive dialogue?
What we have on the innovation side, we have an over and above the SBD declaration. We had a confidentiality document that actually covered the declaration, then covers the protection of the trademark. So we had already legal drafted something over and above on the innovation side, just to protect the innovators and the entity.
Right,
yes.
Right. And have you been using SBD4 for single sourcing?
Yes, we've been using them for single sourcing.
Sourcing. And do you think there might be a challenge now with some of these statements on the single sourcing where it says you may not, engage in any dialogue? I don't know if you call it single sourcing or you call it direct negotiations or what you might have called it.
Yes, I think that the issue of the direct dialogue might have a challenge on where you go through limited bidding, because you do have to have the dialogue. Because otherwise, how will you get the proposal in terms of what you actually need and meet your needs? So there will be a bit of a challenge there. And I was just we having an engagement in terms of some of the issues, especially on that are impacting our policy with our legal on Friday. We normally just have a session trying to see what are the impacts that the bidders might give us a challenge, or we might have internally the challenge in terms of interpretation of certain matters before we actually, I can send a query over to Treasury in terms of certain matters.
How are you dealing with this, with the implementation date, Khali? Sorry, I'm abusing you now.
No, that's fine, Sean. What normally I do when a new instruction comes, I have what do you call it? Before we can update the policy or where we're working on the policy, I have what I call an adoption approval that I take to the accounting officer to say we want. We are in the process of adopting the policy. Of course, then I'll have to outline the timelines and outline the program and request that I want to adopt it into the process. Then I just do that.
Great. Have you received exemption yet?
I haven't received an exemption yet. The feedback hasn't come through yet.
But you have applied. Thank you, Khali. Ron might want to engage with you.
I only got a complaint.
Not with her, but on another point on 3.5.
Thanks. Khali, just wrap up then. Go ahead, Khali.
As Christian, I was just wrapping up on the exemption to say because of being 5 entities, they were just saying my exemption was too long, so they're still going through. Yeah, so I wish I should have just split the entities.
and they wish you had done the same. Thank you, Khali.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ron, before you come in, Angela, did you want to say something? I did see you raised your hand just now. Okay, if not, then go ahead, Ron.
Sean, just listening, I was, always looking at the extreme, like innovation, but 3.5 is just egregious from a normal procurement.
Yes.
So bear with me, and if we're out of line, I'd love people to jump on us. But from what I understand is that normally when you put out a quote or a bid invitation, you normally invite people that if they have any questions of clarification, etc., that they can ask for it. And as a control, you normally say put it in writing, and normally we say if it affects everybody, we'll distribute the answers to everybody. But the way this is worded is that's banned. This only allows for us asking for clarification. It doesn't allow for the other way around. And that's ridiculous. It's totally contrary to international best practice, but maybe my colleagues disagree with me. We have a standard clause saying, guys, any questions of clarification or, write to us. And we reserve the right to distribute the answers to all bidders if you feel it affects everybody. But this actually bans it.
I must reread this 3.5 again. Ron, thank you. Angela, was there something? Sanele? Go ahead, Sanele.
Just a quick one back into the instruction 7.2. So if you read this correctly, if you decide not to use this standard bidding document form, what then do you use as the others have been repeated? Because I don't know if I'm understanding correctly. If they say institution may incorporate this, so if you decide, am I understanding correctly that you have a choice of not using it if they say you may use?
So Nele, that it is very confusing because let me just quickly go to it here. It says you may incorporate the information in SBD4 with your bid documents, but then it says that everyone who does respond must complete this. So it is weird. It's I guess it's saying if you leave it out of the bid document, that would not be a finding, but it would be a finding if they don't complete it.
It means they would have to, service providers would then have to go and find it themselves.
Yes, if you don't do it, correct. It is weird. Just to confirm, SBD 8 and 9 no longer exists from the 1st of April. SBD 8 and SBD 9. So the two practice notes that issued those instructions have been repealed. And with it, 8 and 9, SBD 8 and 9 have been repealed as well, have been taken out as well. And particularly SBD 9, some of the contents of SBD 9 has been included now in this SBD4. So yeah, it's let's see. I think there's certainly some interesting points coming through.